Hi, it's Rachel with Stirring the Deep. I've been talking about letting go of the pit, right? That we have that choice of death or life. And if you keep partaking of the things of death, the lusts of the flesh that create ultimately cruelty and torment in other people's lives, then you are keeping yourself tied to this pit. And if you're holding on to that stuff, your life is going to start to shake, meaning have turmoil and hardship and all this stuff to break you free, to make you let go of those things. And one of the areas, remember I was listing just these different areas where you're partaking of death or you're partaking of life. So it's with the food that you consume, because the food is very symbolic of what's happening in the spirit realm, okay? And so now is a time to be moving back into a new earth and a new heavens, and it's partaking only of life. The time of death is past. And it talks about the separation between men and women, how that's festered with the lust that keeps them tied to death, which they each do in their own ways, that keeps them separated, because in lust you keep creating death in your union. And so that adultery of the heart, all that, the lust of the heart, all that has to be purged so that you can find love instead, so that you can come together and have that oneness and that unity. And talked about how it's no longer about destroying your enemies, but loving your enemies. Because like you, they were in the pit into death, and they were in all that pain. And I'm going to dive into that more in this video. This video is going to be about that. The aspect that I talked about was that separation between men, between people in your life. Okay, that when you have death in your existence, you're going to have pain in your relationships, because that's what it creates. Okay, so it's about how do you reconcile all that and move on. And it is just as another summary in talking about that death and life, and how people, in the wilderness, they feast, they wanted the quail, they wanted the death, they wanted the ground was cursed, remember? So that's a part of death too, when it's sweat and it's toil and it's effort to till the ground, versus it being a blessing to you and blessing you. These are all contrasts that you find in Scripture. And to abide in mercy and life, and not sacrifice, and not that animal sacrifice. And people don't necessarily do animal sacrifices these days, but they're still abiding in death, and they're still sacrificing so much. They don't understand how when you're with God now, it's all about life and His mercy and His life growing in you. It's not about sacrifice. So there's all these differences about what it is to be in death, what it is to be in life, okay? But today I want to talk about that with other people, because that's also something that people feed as a lust, is anger, bitterness, blame, all those things. And when you've been really hurt by someone, it's hard not to be there. Like, a lot of people, they want to forgive, they want to let go, because they know it's damaging to them, but it's hard to. How do you let go? And here's a couple of things to understand about this. And this, I want to give you some practical ways to look at this, all right? And one, remember, the past is gone, okay? So all that you really have is the memories of that experience, okay? So that's what you have to address. And first of all, the past is not healed, okay? Because it's gone, actually no longer exists. So some people are kind of somehow waiting for that past to change in a weird way. Well, it doesn't change. What changes is how you see it, your perspective of it. All right, so, and this is what I'm going to try to paint for you in this video, is some different perspectives of what it really was about, okay, that will help you to let go of the pit. So all that anger and bitterness and resentment and all that stuff. Okay, so the first is realizing that the past no longer exists, all right? So in this present moment, if you hold on to that past, you're making it still alive, because you're living by that. And what I mean by that is if someone hurt you in the past and now you're remaining in that unforgiveness and bitterness and resentment and anger in your present moment. Because if you're hanging on to that, you're not allowing God to create something new in your present moment. And for you to enter into the kingdom of heaven and to be as a child, that means that you're letting God create all your present moments, because what he creates is life. So if you're holding on to the pit, the past pains, you're keeping God from creating life right in this present moment. So it's very important to learn to let go of that. And a couple things to consider, okay? And this is something where it's so important to spend that time with God and writing and reflecting and asking, because what he will do is reframe your past and all that happened so you see it differently. And when you do that, that changes everything. Our perspective, our perceptions, how we see things is everything, okay? It's very, very important. So here's a couple things to consider about reframing how people have hurt you in the past, okay? One is that in a lot of situations, people are a co-creator of that pain. So if someone hurts you, a lot of times what you want to do is just blame them. It's all their fault. That's not realistic, okay? Truly, because when you are, and I'll address childhood in a minute, but when you are older, regardless of all that you learn, the wiring in your head, you have accepted and allowed that dishonor in your life, of allowing someone to hurt you or treat you a certain way, okay? So you put yourself in that situation, you partook of that. When it started out a little rough, you continue to stay in it, you would feed it. If you are hurt in relationships by adultery or whatever, a lot of times you are one also partaking in the lust spirit or trying to be an image of lust. It's like you have to realize that we received and had that pain happen to us because we were also abiding in death and doing the things that fed that and created that dynamic. Okay, and this goes very deep in people's lives, but you have to be willing to see that. So seek that from that pure wisdom of God of, how did I play a part in this? How did I play that victim? How did I put myself in that situation through the people pleasing, through fear, through whatever it is, and not trusting God and his wisdom and his guidance? Because that is what allows pain to just continue to grow and manifest in people's life, okay? And when you are a child, and a lot of children are subjected to things that are very, very harmful and painful because of their parents, okay? But the thing is that that child has a part of that spirit, and ultimately that spirit has its own journey to grow on. And so we're all born in death. So we may have that pain at different degrees from different people in our life, but the fact is we're all in pain. We all are born in this death. That's the other significant thing about Adam and Eve, is that they were the only two that first weren't born, but made, and they existed when there was no death. Because the rest of us were born into death. That's all we've ever known, okay? And that is one thing that God shows in families, is that we all affect each other. You cannot disconnect from each other. And the horrific things that happen to children should be tools to wake us up to realize we've all got to deal with ourselves, because no one's in isolation. We all affect each other. And that's why it's so heartbreaking with children, with animals, because they are just receiving the brunt of that evilness. But you realize that you too continue in that, even when you know better, even when you know what you shouldn't be doing, you do. So you want to blame other people, the parents, but you know what? You're making the same choices. You've done that. We've all done that. So that blame thing is very dangerous. So you got to realize that that spirit was corrupted from the beginning. Okay, people weren't born with those pure spirits, because it was holding the spirit ultimately of their parents, which were also corrupted. But with Christ and that newness of spirit, it doesn't matter where you are in your family, it doesn't matter who's transitioning but you can transition. So that's where now it's all, each one is individual. But that family dynamic and those things that happen are to show us that connectedness and how we affect each other and how our spirits affect each other, and that pain and suffering and how it's passed along to one another. Okay, it has some very powerful lessons in there about just how really evil following our own way and following our lust are. So if you enjoy your lust in whatever manner, cruelty is the flip side. It's just what death is. So when you start understanding this in your relationships, it helps you to look at them a little bit differently. So one is realizing that we all are born in death. We're all in the same position. And it's all, if you stay in a relationship long enough, you're going to hurt each other. Because your hurt, pain, and fallen state is going to affect someone else's. Okay, so that's the mercy that we give. You give mercy to other people when you realize that you need that mercy. When you realize you're all in the same boat. It manifests differently, but you're all in that pit. You all need redemption. Okay, and that starts leading you to compassion and to mercy, which God desires. So this is what the pit creates. It's just horrible. And if you've had those horrible experiences, why would you ever continue to feed death in your life? But people do. They have these horrible experiences, yet they want to continue to be cruel in some way in their life by continuing in their lusts. Okay, so that is one whole aspect, is this just the effects and abiding in this pit and what it creates, and realizing our own part that we create in creating all this pain. And I said with other people, what happens is people in your life reflect a lot of times where you're at. Okay, so if you're in a relationship with somebody and they're dishonoring you and you're staying in that relationship and you're abiding it, that shows that you're dishonoring yourself. The only reason that is happening is because you also are dishonoring yourself. So you're upset with them for doing it, but you're doing it as well. That's why you cannot judge, because you're judging yourself. And so people that don't dishonor themselves, they don't stay in those relationships. They don't even get into them. They don't even get that far. Do you see? So you see how we play parts in it, but as long as you blame someone else, you will never grow out of it. And so people in our life are a reflection of who we are. That's where, your friends reflect who you are. Your spouse reflects where you are in your growth and your development, because it's what you're seeing and what you're allowing. Because if you saw and had pure love, that would change so many things. And for people, if their hearts are so hard that they can't respond to that pure love, which I said I think are truly few, then you have to distance yourself, because you can't be in that pain and dishonor. Okay? So you got to realize that people are a reflection of you, and when you start to change, the people around you start to change. If they can change with you, they grow with you, so those people remain. Other people leave, and new people come in. People that are more a reflection of where you're at this time. So you've got to realize that your world is like a world of mirrors, reflecting who you are, what you think, what you believe, what you really feel. And that's why people, and they get so angry and bitter and full of bitterness and resentment, they're so blind to their own state and to what they're creating, because they're a part of that. That's why it's in their life, because they are a part of that and they're manifesting it and creating it. Okay? So you got to examine. That's where he says, get the plank out of your eye, and then you'll help your brother get the speck out of his. Because it is a huge plank. I mean, it totally mars all your vision. But once you realize that, then that love and that purity can help. It's just a speck in someone else's eye. That's how you see it. But if it's in your eye, it's huge, because it affects everything. So to realize that, one, it's the pit, and this is death, and that's what it creates. That others are a reflection of us. So that is to teach us and to show us. So because they're a reflection of us, that means they are really there to be tools to help us. Everyone in your life, whether you judge them good or bad, is a tool to teach you and to reflect what's happening in your life. Okay, so if you see someone that is not good come in and you don't engage that, that shows you that you have that honor. If you have someone that's abusive in whatever way, verbal, emotional, physical, and you're allowing that, that's how you already are treating yourself. It's not that person. You were already in that state, because if you weren't, you wouldn't allow it. So those things, those you should see them as tools. Be like, oh my gosh, this is not good. I need to see what's going on in here. I need to see myself differently. I need to get a new perspective. And people that come out of those, that's exactly what they do. They start honoring themselves. They start seeing themselves differently. That's what changed, was their vision of themselves, who they are, how relationships are supposed to work, what the dynamics are going on, their responsibility in creating everything that's around them. So once you start realizing that the past pains in your life and the hurts from other people were tools to reflect that this is not love, this is not good. So hopefully you don't go down that path, or you see something different in here, and you learn and you grow by that. So you can really look back and be thankful, because that's what they were there to show you. Because if you never saw that, then you would never know that was in you. But that would never happen, because you're always going to see what's in you. Okay? Because it's always reflected. And you don't want that. You don't want that corruption. You don't want that pain. You don't want that dishonor. You don't want any of that lack of value to be within your vessel. You want a cleansed, purified vessel. And your world and those people around you will show you what is in your vessel by how you respond to them. Okay? So once you start realizing these different things, these start reframing your past and your past hurts. And this is another thing about someone being a reflection of who you are, is that once you realize that the hurt is no longer tied to that particular person, but it's tied to that state of your soul. They just happen to be the one that reflected it. So when you realize they just, like, it could have been someone else, but it wasn't. But this person, given the circumstances and everything, they were the one that actually reflected that in you. So you can't blame them and attach that hurt to them. You've got to come separate and realize that was just reflecting what wasn't love. Okay? And again, that's seeing sin as the disease and not as the person. That's a very important distinction, okay, to make a difference with, or to hold. So these are so important to understand, because this relationship with other people, because this is God's commandment, to love others as yourself. So you got to get into what that loving means, and what loving your enemies means, and the reconciliation, your own heart, and how people reflect you, and what you're learning, and how they've been tools to push you into God, to push you into the truth, to seek what true love is, not to stay in the pain. That is not why they're there. When you touch something hot, you pull your hand back. When you have something that doesn't feel good, you don't keep doing it. You have to pull back. You got to reevaluate. You got to realize that a lot of it has to do with you, not just with that person. Because they're in the same state that you're in. We're all in the same state. The question is, are we learning? And as we learn, we help others to learn. And then we can all grow up together. Till next time, keep stirring the deep. It's the one thing that changes everything else.